The rain had soaked through her only shawl by the time Clara reached the iron gates of Thornwood Manor. Her fingers, numb and trembling, gripped the cold metal bars as she stared up at the massive stone mansion that seemed to swallow the grey sky above. 3 days without food, 4 nights sleeping in ditches. And now, the daughter of a disgraced gentleman was about to beg for bread from the most feared duke in all of England. She had heard the stories. Everyone had. The Duke of Thornwood was a monster, a recluse who had not smiled in 10 years, a man who had buried his wife and then buried himself alive in this fortress of grief. Servants whispered that he had gone mad, that he threw anyone who displeased him into the streets, that he had once reduced a grown man to tears with nothing more than a single cold glance. But Clara had nowhere else to go. Her father had died 6 months ago, drowning in debt and disgrace. The creditors had taken everything, the house, the furniture, even her mother's wedding ring. She had been turned out into the world with nothing but a tattered dress and a heart full of shame. She had walked for weeks, seeking work, seeking shelter, seeking anything that might keep her alive. But no one wanted a ruined gentlewoman with no references and no connections. She was invisible, forgotten, the kind of person who could starve to death on a street corner and no one would notice. Until she remembered the Duke. Her father had once mentioned him, a strange, distant connection through her mother's family. Nothing close enough to claim, but perhaps close enough to beg. She pulled the iron bell rope. The sound echoed through the courtyard like a death knell. Clara waited, shivering, as the rain continued its relentless assault. Her dress clung to her thin frame, her teeth chattered, her vision swam with dizziness. When the massive oak door finally creaked open, she nearly collapsed with relief. A stern-faced butler stared down at her with obvious disdain. His eyes travelled over her soaked dress, her muddy boots, her pale face, and she saw the exact moment he decided she was worthless. "State your business," he said flatly. I need to see the Duke," Clara managed through chattering teeth. "Please, I have nowhere else to go." The butler's expression did not change. "His Grace does not receive visitors, especially not," his eyes swept over her again. "Your kind. Please," she begged, hating the desperation in her voice. "I am Clara Ashworth. My father was." "I know who your father was," the butler interrupted coldly. "A gambler and a thief. We have no use for your kind here. Leave before I have you removed." He began to close the door. Clara's hand shot out, gripping the edge of the oak. "Please," she whispered. "I'm not asking for charity. I'll work. I'll do anything. I'll scrub floors, clean chimneys, anything. I just need—" "You need to leave," the butler said. And then a voice echoed from somewhere deep within the manor. A voice so cold and commanding that it seemed to freeze the rain itself. "Let her in." The butler froze. His face went pale. "Your Grace, I didn't realize you were—" "I said let her in." The door swung open fully, and Clara found herself staring at the man who had haunted her nightmares since childhood. The Duke of Thornwood was exactly as terrifying as the stories claimed. He stood in the shadows of the grand foyer, taller than any man she had ever seen, with broad shoulders that seemed to fill the entire doorway. His face was carved from stone, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, a mouth that looked like it had never known how to smile. His eyes were the deepest, coldest grey she had ever seen, like winter storms, like the grave. But it was not his face that made her gasp. It was the portrait on the wall behind him. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Her heart stopped. The world tilted dangerously beneath her feet. Above the massive marble fireplace hung a painting of a woman, a beautiful woman with dark hair and kind eyes, and a smile that seemed to radiate warmth even through the oil and canvas. She wore a gown of deep blue silk, and her hands were folded gracefully in her lap. And she had Clara's face, the same oval shape, the same high cheekbones, the same gentle curve of the lips. Clara stared at the portrait, her mind spinning, her blood running cold. She had never seen this painting before. She had never even heard of this woman, but the resemblance was so uncanny, so impossible, that she could not breathe. The Duke's cold grey eyes followed her gaze. Something flickered in their depths, a flash of pain so sharp and sudden that it stole her breath. "You see it too," he said quietly. Clara could not speak. She could only stare at the portrait, at her own face staring back at her from the wall of a stranger's manor. "Who is she?" she finally whispered. The Duke moved closer. His footsteps echoed through the silent foyer like thunder. He stopped directly in front of her, so close that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the faint scent of sandalwood and something darker, something like grief. "She was my wife," he said. Clara's knees buckled. The Duke's name was Alexander Blackwood, and he had not touched another human being in 6 years. Not since the day they lowered Eleanor into the cold ground. He had loved her with every fibre of his being, had worshipped her, had built his entire world around her smile, and then she had been taken from him in the cruelest way imaginable. A fever that ravaged her body in 3 days, a death that came so quickly that he had not even had time to say goodbye. He had retreated to Thornwood Manor after that, had dismissed most of the servants, had stopped attending social functions, stopped answering letters, stopped speaking to anyone who reminded him of the world he had lost. The portrait of Eleanor hung in the foyer because he could not bear to put it away. He needed to see her face every time he walked through the front door. He needed to remember what happiness had looked like before it was stolen from him. And now, this woman, this shivering, soaking, desperate woman who had knocked on his door like a ghost from the past. She had Eleanor's face. Not just similar features. Not just a passing resemblance. It was as if Eleanor had come back from the grave, younger and thinner and more fragile, but unmistakably herself. Alexander stared at the woman as she swayed on her feet, her face as pale as milk, her eyes wide with shock and fear. She looked like she was about to collapse. "Get a blanket," he ordered the butler, "and tea, and food." The butler hesitated. "Your Grace, are you certain? Now." The butler scurried away. Alexander watched the woman struggle to stay upright. She was clearly starving. Clearly exhausted, her dress was nothing but rags, her hair a tangled mess, her boots so worn that he could see her bare toes through the cracks. And yet, there was something in her eyes, something fierce and stubborn and unbroken. "What is your name?" he asked. "Clara," she whispered. "Clara Ashworth." Ashworth. The name stirred something in his memory. A connection, perhaps. A link to the past. "Come," he said, gesturing toward the drawing room. "Sit down before you fall down." She hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the portrait, then back to his face. He could see the questions swimming in her gaze, the desperate need to understand what was happening. "Please," she said. "Who was she? The woman in the painting?" Alexander's jaw tightened. He did not speak of Eleanor. Not to anyone. Not ever. But looking at this woman, looking at that face, he found the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Eleanor," he said. "She was the light of my life, the reason I still drew breath, and then she died, and I have been dead ever since." The drawing room was warm. Clara sat in a velvet chair that cost more than her father's entire estate, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of lavender and something else, something masculine and comforting. A tray of food sat before her, bread and cheese and cold meat, more than she had eaten in weeks. She should have been grateful, should have been devouring every bite. But she could not stop staring at the portrait. The Duke had brought her here, had ordered food and tea and a fire, and then had stood in the corner watching her, like she was a puzzle he could not solve. His grey eyes never left her face. "Your father," he said finally. "What was his name?" "Charles Ashworth," she replied quietly. Something flickered in the Duke's eyes. Recognition. Pain. "I knew him," he said. "Years ago. He was connected to my wife's family somehow. A distant cousin, I believe." Clara nodded slowly. "My mother always said we had noble blood somewhere in our past, but she never spoke of it. She was ashamed, I think, of what we had become." The Duke moved closer. He knelt before her chair, his face level with hers, and Clara's heart stopped. His eyes were so close, so intense. She could see the shadows beneath them, the lines of grief etched into his face, the deep well of pain that lurked behind his cold exterior. "Look at me," he said. She did. "Tell me about your mother," he said. "What was her name?" "Margaret," Clara whispered. "Margaret Ashworth. She died when I was 12. The Duke's expression shifted. Something like hope flickered in his gaze, quickly extinguished. "And her maiden name? Do you know it?" Clara shook her head. She never spoke of it. She said it didn't matter anymore, that we were nothing now. The Duke rose abruptly. He paced to the window, his hands clenched at his sides, his shoulders rigid with tension. Clara watched him, confused and frightened. What was happening? Why was this terrifying man so interested in her family history? Why did the portrait of his dead wife look exactly like her? "Your Grace," she said hesitantly, "I don't understand. What does any of this have to do with me?" He turned to face her. His grey eyes burned with intensity. "That portrait," he said, "the woman in it. She was not just my wife. She was my whole world, and when she died, a piece of me died with her." He moved toward her, stopping just inches away. His presence was overwhelming, powerful, terrifying. "I never remarried," he said. "I never even looked at another woman. Because no one could ever replace her." Clara's heart hammered in her chest. "But you," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "you have her face, her eyes, her mouth, and I need to know why." The days that followed were strange. Clara had expected to be turned out onto the street the moment the Duke lost interest in his morbid curiosity. Instead, she found herself given a room, given clothes, given a position as a lady's companion, though the Duke had no wife or sister or daughter who needed a companion. His reasoning was simple, cold, and devastating. "Stay here," he had said. "Work for me, and I will look into your mother's past." She had agreed because she had nowhere else to go. But every day, the Duke grew stranger. He watched her constantly, not with desire, not with warmth, but with something that looked almost like desperation, as if he were trying to see his dead wife in her features, trying to find something that was not there. It should have frightened her. It did frighten her, but there was something else there too, something she could not quite name. When the Duke looked at her, she did not feel like a servant. She felt like she did not know what she felt. Seen, perhaps. Valued. Like she mattered in a way she had never mattered before. And the more time she spent with him, the more she began to see past his cold exterior. She saw the way his hands trembled when he looked at the portrait, the way his voice cracked when he spoke of his dead wife, the way he stayed up all night sometimes, wandering the halls like a ghost, unable to sleep. He was not a monster. He was a man drowning in grief. And against all logic, against all reason, Clara found herself wanting to help him. It happened on the 15th day. Clara had been tasked with dusting the library, a massive room filled with thousands of books, shelves that towered to the ceiling, and a great fireplace that crackled with warmth. She had been working for hours when she heard footsteps behind her. The Duke stood in the doorway, his grey eyes fixed on her face. "Your Grace," she said, curtsying, "I did not expect you." "I needed to see you," he said, and there was something raw in his voice, something unguarded that made her heart skip. He moved toward her, stopping just feet away. "I have been thinking about you," he admitted, "about your mother, about the portrait." Clara's hands tightened on the book she was holding. "Have you discovered something?" He shook his head. "Not yet, but I will." His eyes searched her face. "Clara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course, Your Grace." "When you look at the portrait of Eleanor," he said slowly, "do you see her, or do you see yourself?" Clara's throat tightened. She had asked herself the same question 100 times. "I see both," she admitted. "I see a woman I never knew, who shared my face. And I see what I could have been, I suppose, if my family had not fallen from grace." The Duke moved closer, so close now that she could feel the heat of his body, could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes. "Eleanor was the love of my life," he said hoarsely, "and I have spent 10 years mourning her, 10 years thinking I would never feel anything again, never hope, never dream." His hand came up, trembling slightly, and touched her cheek. "And then you walked through my door," he whispered, looking exactly like her, and for the first time in 10 years, I felt something other than pain. Clara's heart raced, her breath caught in her throat. "Your Grace," she breathed. Don't call me that," he said urgently. "Call me Alexander, please." She stared at him, her mind spinning, her emotions in chaos. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. She was a servant, he was a duke, and he was clearly confusing her with his dead wife. But there was something in his eyes, something that looked almost like hope. "Alexander," she whispered. And then he kissed her. The kiss was everything Clara had never dared to dream of, and everything she feared. His lips were warm against hers, gentle at first, then more urgent as his arms wrapped around her and pulled her close. She melted into him, her hands gripping his shoulders, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and desire. She had never been kissed before, never been held like this, never felt so completely consumed by another person. And then she remembered. This was the Duke, the most feared man in all of England, and he was kissing her, a nobody, a beggar, because she reminded him of his dead wife. She pulled away abruptly, her hand flying to her lips. "Your Grace," she started. "Alexander," he corrected, his voice rough with emotion. "Alexander," she amended. "You need to stop." His eyes widened. "What? You are kissing me because I look like her," Clara said, her voice trembling. "You don't even know me. You don't know who I am or what I want or anything about me. You only see her." He stared at her, something flickering in his gaze, pain, confusion, and then, slowly, realization. "You're right," he said quietly. "I am sorry. That was wrong of me." He stepped back, and Clara felt the loss of his warmth like a physical blow. "I need to go," she said quickly, gathering her skirts. "I need to." She fled the room before he could stop her. The weeks that followed were excruciating. Clara avoided the Duke as much as possible. She took her meals in her room, worked in the far corners of the manor, and stayed out of his sight. But she could not stop thinking about the kiss, could not stop replaying it in her mind, feeling his lips on hers, his arms around her. She had told him to stop because she was afraid of what he might see when he looked at her, afraid of what she might feel if she let herself. But the truth was, she felt something for him, something that had nothing to do with his title or his wealth or even his face. She saw the broken man beneath the cold exterior, the man who had loved deeply and lost everything, the man who was slowly, painfully beginning to heal. And despite everything, she wanted to be part of that healing. It was the butler who found her first. Clara was in the gardens, tending to the roses, when the stern-faced man appeared at the edge of the path. "There is someone here to see you," he said flatly. "A visitor." Clara frowned. She had no visitors. No one in the world even knew she was here. "Who is it?" she asked. "A woman," the butler said. "She claims to be your aunt." Clara's blood ran cold. She had no aunt. Her mother had been an only child. Her father had been estranged from his family for years. Unless... The butler led her to the drawing room, and when Clara entered, she found a tall, elegant woman in a gown of deep burgundy silk. Her dark hair was swept up in an elaborate style, her face cold and calculating, her eyes sharp as knives. "Clara," the woman said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "At last I have been searching for you for months." Clara stared at her, her heart racing. "Who are you?" "I don't have an aunt." The woman smiled. "Ah, but you do. Your mother, Margaret, was my sister. We were estranged, of course. She made some unfortunate choices, but I am here now to help you." Clara's mind spun. Could this be true? Could her mother have had a sister she never mentioned? "Why?" Clara asked suspiciously. "Why would you help me now, after all these years?" "Because we are family," the woman said smoothly, "and family takes care of one another." She stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with something that Clara could not quite identify. "But I must ask you something, dear girl. What are you doing here? In the Duke's manor? Surely you know the stories about him. He is a monster, a madman." Clara stiffened. "He has been kind to me." "Kind?" The woman laughed. "Oh, my dear, you are so naive. He does not want you. He wants the ghost of his dead wife. You are nothing but a substitute, a shadow." Clara's heart clenched. The words hit too close to home. "Leave," she said quietly. "Now." But her aunt did not leave. She stayed, and she whispered poison in Clara's ears. She told her that the Duke would never truly love her, that he would always compare her to Eleanor and find her wanting, that she was nothing but a temporary fix for a broken man. And Clara believed her, because deep down she had been thinking the same thing herself. The worst part came when her aunt revealed the truth about her mother. "Margaret was not your father's wife," she said coldly. "She was his mistress. You are a bastard, Clara, a child of shame, and everyone in high society knows it." Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. A bastard. All these years she had believed herself a gentlewoman, had believed she had some claim to respectability. But she was nothing, worse than nothing. And now the Duke would know too. Her aunt smiled, seeing the devastation on Clara's face. "I will be staying in the village," she announced. "We have much to discuss, much to plan." She swept out of the room, leaving Clara alone with her shattered illusions. Clara found the Duke in his study. He was standing by the window, staring out at the gardens, and when she entered, he turned to face her. His grey eyes softened at the sight of her. "Clara," he said, "I have been thinking about you." "Your Grace," she began, but he interrupted her. "Alexander," he corrected. "We talked about this." Clara's throat tightened. She could not do this, not now, not after everything she had just learned. "Your Grace," she continued, ignoring his correction, "I have something to tell you. Something that may change how you see me." His eyes narrowed. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "My mother was not married to my father. She was his mistress. I am a bastard. The words hung in the air between them. Clara waited for the disgust, the horror, the same cold dismissal she had faced from everyone else. Instead, the Duke moved toward her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something that looked almost like relief. "Is that all?" he asked quietly. Clara blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, stopping inches away from her, "that my family has never been one to care about such things. My grandfather was a bastard. My great-uncle married his maid. We are not the sort to throw stones." Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. "You don't care?" He reached out, cupping her face in his hands. "I care about you," he said fiercely. "Not your parentage, not your title, not your connections. You." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "But the portrait." "The portrait is just a painting," he said. "Eleanor is gone. She will always have a place in my heart, but she is not here. You are, and you have made me feel alive again, made me hope again." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you, Clara," he whispered. "Not because you look like her, but because of who you are, your courage, your kindness, the way you never gave up, even when the world was against you." Clara sobbed. All the fear, all the doubt, all the pain of the past months came pouring out of her. "Alexander," she choked. "I love you too. I have loved you since the moment you kissed me in the library." He smiled, the first real smile she had ever seen on his face, and kissed her. The wedding was small. Clara had no family to invite. Alexander had few friends. But the few who came witnessed something beautiful. Two broken souls finding healing in each other. The Duke's aunt, of course, had tried to stop it. She had spread rumors throughout the village, had tried to blackmail the Duke into calling off the wedding. But Alexander had anticipated her schemes. He had had her investigated, discovered her true motivations. She was deep in debt, desperate for money, and had hoped to use Clara's newfound position to enrich herself. "The family secret," Clara had said to him on the day of the wedding, "is that my mother was a mistress." Alexander had laughed, a real laugh, warm and free. "And my family's secret," he had replied, "is that we are all secretly bastards and rogues. We are perfectly matched." They stood in the gardens of Thornwood Manor, surrounded by roses and sunshine, and said their vows. When the ceremony was over, Alexander lifted Clara into his arms and carried her inside. "The portrait," he said, nodding toward the painting of Eleanor that still hung in the foyer. "What should we do with it?" Clara looked at the beautiful woman who shared her face. Once she had felt threatened by her, jealous, inadequate. Now she felt only gratitude. "Leave it," she said softly. "She was part of your life. She made you who you are. And besides," she smiled up at him, "she looks like my grandmother." Alexander laughed again and kissed her deeply. And for the first time in 10 years, Thornwood Manor was filled with joy instead of grief. Thank you for watching this story of two broken souls who found healing in each other's arms. If you enjoyed this tale of love and redemption, please take a moment to like this video. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another historical romance story. We release new stories every week, tales of dukes and duchesses, forbidden love, heartbreak and second chances. Tell me in the comments below, what part of this story touched your heart the most? Was it when Clara knocked on the Duke's door, the moment he kissed her in the library, or when she finally learned the truth about her mother? I read every comment, and your stories inspire the ones I write next. Share this video with someone who loves historical romance. Send it to your sister, your best friend, or anyone who believes in love that crosses all boundaries. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a knock on a stranger's door. See you in the next story.